Welcome back to Diabetic Foot Files, the podcast where we decode the science, pathology, and sometimes the mystery behind diabetic wounds. I am tired today, so lo siento. But today we're going to talk about something that I was trying to explain to one of my patients about this today. It destroys more healing wounds than almost anything, and that's offloading, like if you're not offloading properly. So we're going to talk about transitional offloading. So it's the phase between like when you're from strict offloading, like let's say you're in the TCC or in a removable cam walker or a non-removable cam walker where we take you up and where you return to normal walking. I'm always excited for that phase when you get to return back to walking because you won't fully healed. And if this stage is handled poorly, a perfectly healed ulcer can reopen within days. So it's a very critical and fragile phase of actual wound healing. Okay. It actually is a phase of diabetic wound healing, transitional offloading. And this is where many clinicians and patients, we do see some reopening and some failure in the wound healing because healing the wound is only half the job, right? The real challenge is teaching the foot how to walk again without breaking down again. So today we're going to explore the biomechanics of pressure redistribution. I already know I covered a little bit about that, but transitional offloading is a major phase that people usually forget about because once the wound is healed, we're like, off you go, bye, ta-ta. And it's not like it's not like that. We have to find the right shoe. We have to do the right offloading. You might need orthotics. You might even need a crow boot. It's different, okay? But we're gonna go talk about the protocols when it comes to that. So, what is offloading? We already know that's like the number one treatment when it comes to neuropathic ulcers on the diabetic foot, right? So, offloading is the removal and redistribution of mechanical pressure from an ulcerated area. And in diabetic foot ulcers, the pressure is the primary driver of the tissue breakdown. I was trying to explain that to a patient. He was explaining to me that he likes to drive the shoe that he had was quite comfortable, very flexible. If you can bend the shoe, it's not good for you. That see that rhymes. If you can bend the shoe, it's not good for you. You don't want it to be bendable because it's not going to be supportive. So yeah, you heard it here first. If you can bend the shoe, it's not good for you. So the equation is very simple. Pressure plus neuropathy plus time equals an ulcer. So neuropathy removes the pain feedback, right? The patient keeps on walking, the pressure continues, tissue ischemia begins, macrovascular occlusion develops, and eventually there is dermal breakdown, fat pad injury, and bone exposure. So, offloading devices include total contact cast, removable cast walker, heel suspension boots, which are really nice. Darko has some orthotics and forefoot offloading shoes. Darko also has some great ones. But what happens after the wound closes? Remember, it's the maximum that the skin integrity, the tensile strength of the skin after a wound heals. I think it's the maximum it can be is 80%. It can never be 100% normal skin tensile strength after it had a wound. Okay. So think about that. So this is where transitional offloading begins after the wound heals, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the physiology of the healing tissue. So when a diabetic ulcer closes, the tissue is not normal skin. That's what I was explaining earlier. It's biologically fragile. So healing occurs in phases, right? So the inflammation, we have the neutrophils and the macrophages that are cleaning the debris, and the cytokines activate the fibroblasts. The proliferative phase, right? The fibroblasts produce the collagen type 3, and new capillaries form through angiogenesis, and keratinocytes migrate to close the wound. And then the remodeling, so collagen type 3 is converted to collagen type 1. The tensile strength it gradually increases with time, but this is a very critical detail. Even after complete epithelialization of this diabetic foot ulcer, tissue strength is at 3 weeks, 20% to this normal strength. 20% after 3 weeks. 6 weeks, about 50%, okay? We're just going by statistics of what they learn. And after months, like I said, the maximum I believe it can get is 80%, okay? Meaning that the wound may look like it's healed, but it might biologically, mechanically, it is extremely weak. It's not the same type of skin as it was before. So when it comes to the biomechanics, walking creates tremendous pressure on the foot, but we all need to walk, right? And typical plantar pressures, let's say the forefoot plantar pressure is about 200 to 600 kPa Pascal. And then in diabetics with that deformities, their plantar pressure is actually higher, about 700 to 1000 kPa. Okay. And the areas most affected, which is, of course, the metatarsal heads, the hallux, and the heel. So if the pressure is reintroduced too fast, several things happen. Microvascular collapse. So, capillaries close around 32 mmHg. So high plantar pressures exceed the threshold. Shear forces, so horizontal sliding forces tear the collagen fibers. Fat pad displacement. So diabetic fat pads are already thin and stiff. So plantar pressure actually pushes them aside and the bone becomes a load bearing surface. But when the wound finally heals, why does transitionally offloading fail? So many patients go from, like I said, total contact socks to regular shoes. And this is kind of catastrophic because the foot suddenly absorbs the 100% of the body weight again, compared to it being in a total contact cast or a cam boot, right? Because the healing tissue is overwhelmed because if we were babying in it, we were literally putting the new healthy tissue that was healing over this ulcer, right? In a crib or in a walker, pretty much, in a little baby walker, right? Because when babies are learning to walk, they have the walker. That's what we're doing to the ulcer. But studies have shown nearly 40% of diabetic foot ulcers actually recur, like actually reopen within a year. So improper transitional offloading is a major reason for that. So what is a transitioning offloading protocol? So phase one, immediate post-closure, like 2 to 3 weeks, continue strict offloading. So that's another thing I do with patients. I know they get mad sometimes because they want to get out of that boot so badly, but I keep them still in the cat boot, okay? So the removable cast walker or the offloading boot or the forefoot wedge shoe, okay? But the goal is to allow the collagen remodeling to just get a little bit stronger. Next, phase two, which is going to be 2 to 4 weeks, protected weight bearing. So we're going to transition the patient to a diabetic healing shoe or like a rocker sole shoe or custom orthotic, okay, for their pressure point areas. And walking time is limited. Example, so day 1 to 3, 10 minutes of walking every hour. So you can gradually increase. And this is also where physical therapy comes into play as well. Phase three, custom orthotic integration. I mean, you should already have your patient casted by the time they heal so that because it takes it takes about 2 weeks sometimes depending on your orthotic distributor or if you cast them yourself and make them yourself. But you have to have a good, decent orthotic, whether it's accommodative, whether it's what's called again supportive and rigid. But also think about Darko Pogo shoe. I really like it because it's quite accommodative, and then they have the removable pegs, right? Where you can actually offload, like saying you can offload the metatarsal pads, you can offload the cutouts, you can do multi-density foams, things like that. Not if you get into a different shoe. But pressure mapping can actually help a lot when you're trying to verify the reduction or where to pressure redistribute. Next, phase four is going to be full activity with monitoring. Yes, you're still going to be monitored after you heal from your diabetic foot ulcer. I know a lot of people like to go ghost. And so the patient transitions into the diabetic footwear and then custom inserts, but surveillance still continues, okay? Still want to check up on you. Recurrence risk never disappears when it comes to the diabetic foot ulcer, okay? And the best thing is to not have a recur, but one thing I could say for common, when patients do heal, in my experience, they don't come back until it reopens. And I understand that because who want to go back to the doctor's office that you've been going to at least once a week or every 2 weeks over a foot ulcer, you want to get back to life, you want to have a normal life, and you want to just not worry about anything anymore, you know? But it is very important to prevent the recurrence, and that's why you still need to follow up and make sure that the skin integrity is still good and better. Make sure we check for the red areas, things like that. So let's do a quick case story. So a reopened metatarsal head ulcer. So 62-year-old diabetic man with a plantar ulcer under the second metatarsal head, which is very common. So it healed after 6 weeks in a total contact cast. The cast was removed and the patient returned to regular sneakers. And 3 weeks later, the ulcer reopened. Why is that? Because the pressure measurements revealed that, the patient had about 850 kPa at the metatarsal head. So the newly skin ruptured very quite easily. So what was required was repeated offloading. Okay, so right after he healed, you should have kept it should have been kept in the strict cam boot for another 2 to 3 weeks. Cast him for the custom orthotics for that metatarsal head and make a metatarsal pad as well, have a cutout as well. But a metatarsal pad would be good enough, okay? But that would be super helpful for that patient. Next, case two story, 55-year-old female with a heel ulcer. Remember, heel carries a lot of pressure. So after closure, the patient was transitioned to continue in the heel suspension boot. And then week 3 to 4, rocker bottom diabetic shoe. Week 5, custom orthotics. And at 1 year follow up, no recurrence. Okay. Secret was a slow pressure reintroduction. Next case story is a diabetic patient with Charcot deformity, had a plantar midfoot ulcer that happens quite often with patients who have Charcot. After healing, the patient skipped transitional care. I completely understand because like I said, patients want to get back to their normal life, and it's quite tedious to take care of a diabetic foot ulcer. But the main thing is we have to be disciplined enough to do the things that we need to do to get what we need to get done, so that we don't want this ulcer to open up again. So that's why I try to make the patients understand that this is to help prevent the ulcer from opening up again, because we don't want to go through that long journey again. But the patient skipped transitional care, and what happened? The massive ulcer reopened, had the pressure map them. It showed extreme midfoot pressure, okay? And what happened is the patient eventually required reconstructive surgery instead. So, what are some tools that we can use for transitional offloading? Modern wound care clinics, they usually use pressure mapping, so sensor that measures the plantar forces. Smart insoles, that's a new thing and it's amazing. Real-time pressure alerts. Rocker bottom shoes redistribute weight during gait. And then custom AFOs, which I love, control ankle motion, great for that. And then we also have to think about the psychology. Like I said, the hidden problem, another part of the hidden problem when it comes to transitional offloading is that the patient believes being healed means that you're cured. It means that we got it closed, but diabetic feet, they constantly remain high risk. And like we said, about 40% reopen recurrence within a year. And they did a study, there's less recurrence when they use topical oxygen, they've noticed. So that's another side note, but everybody knows that I'm a firm believer in topical oxygen. I love it. But education when it comes to transitional offloading and when the patients finally heal, daily foot inspections every single day, okay? Proper footwear, avoiding barefoot walking, and early reporting of any redness. Because you have to remember, when you have neuropathy, you can't feel it. So you have to check your feet every day. So, what are some red flags when you're doing transitional offloading? You got to watch for callus formation, redness after walking, warmth, localized swelling. These are early pressure injury signs. And if caught early, the ulcer can be prevented. I remember I had a patient that ulcer healed, and like I said, around Christmas time, fall time, a lot of people are shopping on their feet a lot because of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the callus formed. And shaved down the callus. It has some subdermal hemorrhage, little blood underneath, but we offloaded it and it was perfect after 2 to 3 weeks. It was like no signs of pressure anymore. Okay. We offloaded it perfectly. She understood to take the pressure off and didn't open up again. That's great. What other new technologies that they have for transitional offloading? AI gait monitoring, pressure sensing socks now, and then 3D printed orthotics, which are amazing. So these tools can drastically reduce recurrent rates, okay? So healing a diabetic foot ulcer is not the finish line. That's just the biggest goal. One of our biggest goals is to heal the ulcer and to prevent the recurrence and to protect your mobility and get you walking and increase the quality care of your life. Okay. So in the beginning of a lifelong prevention strategy, transitional offloading is the bridge between healing and re-injuring. We're trying to prevent the recurrence. So handle the bridge carefully because we can save limbs, but if you ignore it, the ulcer does usually return. The recurrence rate is quite high. So I hope everybody loved this episode of Diabetic Foot Files for Transitional Offloading. I'm always excited for this phase for patients. I don't want to get too into it, but I definitely was excited about one of my patients getting to this phase. And yeah, unfortunately, diabetes took the patient more than faster. I don't know how to explain it, but very disappointed how the journey ended for one of my patients because she had a lot ahead of her. But like I said, it's metabolic disorder and disease, and that's why we have to be very well rounded and have everybody on the patient, not just a podiatrist, not just a wound care specialist, physical therapy, endocrinologist, cardiovascular, vascular, never forget vascular, everybody, okay? When it comes to diabetes, never, never, ever, ever forget vascular. They're one of the most important people when it comes to diabetes. So this is Diabetic Foot Files, and take care of your feet because they take care of you.